Yeah, yeah, it was because for Masters Reykjavik, like the first one, I was hyping up Vikings when they were
Oh, right.
going there. And since that event, I have said if at any point a Brazilian team wins, I will come to Brazil. And I have to stick to my word because they finally did it.
At the end
And
of the day, word is all you got, right?
yeah, so now I have to come to Brazil. And then Sacy posted something at me that was like,
It's
appreciate
undodgeable
the
now.
support, but now you must come to Brazil.
Yeah.
And I'm getting a hella like DMs and tips and stuff like on what to do and where to go. And like,
Yeah.
it's pretty funny. Like I mentioned on Platchat, but there was like some guy had messaged me and he was giving me the rundown of all the things I needed to bring and where to go. And then one of them was just like, and please, my friend, bring sunscreen. You are so white, like a vampire. I was just like, yeah. I mean,
The DMs I've gotten
you're
from the
not wrong.
Brazilian fans are just off the wall. It's so incredible, like how passionate they are about Valorant
Yeah,
and their
for
teams and
sure.
their players. Like it's really just a next level from what we see here.
Yeah, 100%.
I mean, I've gotten my fair share of like, if you drop TenZ, I'm gonna do XYZ, and I'm like, oh, hey, you know, like American fans can be passionate too, but
they can be passionate in all types of strange directions.
yes.
But yeah, man, how has the off season been for you?
I haven't really had an off season yet, man. You know, I was GMing, managing, coaching the XSET team. I had to plan out the boot camp in Poland, you
Yeah.
know, book flights myself, all this good stuff. And then, you know, we flew to Poland. We were there for 8 days. Flew from Poland to Istanbul. We were in Istanbul for over a month. And I come home. I have like a day to sleep. And then the very next day, I wake up at 5 in the morning because I'm jet lagged. And I see Fnatic has been announced to partnerships. I'm like, all right, here we go, you know, like on to the next round of things, and couldn't go back to sleep from there. So it's pretty much every day since then has been something like, are we getting in partnership? Are we getting in partnership? We haven't gotten in partnership. We haven't gotten in partnership, and G2 didn't get in partnership. What does that mean for us? And, you know, kind of going through the step by step, like what this is and, you know, figuring it out from there. So I'm finally like, okay, we got the roster together. We got practices kind of started, getting people talking. I can kind of relax a little bit, but yeah, no off season for me, man.
Yeah, for sure. And that G2 deal, was that pretty much confirmed to be happening had that whole situation not occurred with them getting booted out of franchising?
I mean, it was all, you know, kind of up in the air. Like the business side of it hadn't like really been initiated, nor really could it be, but there was definite interest there, and it seemed like that was a good direction the team could have gone if XSET hadn't gotten in, but G2 did.
Right. Yeah. And then how did this offer come to you from Sentinels? So like after Champions and XSET, I'm sure at some point, you know, you find out that XSET aren't going to be in the franchise league. Yeah, what happened with Sen? What did they reach out to you? What did they offer to you? Was it like, yo, come coach for us, bring who you want from the team? Was it something like that?
Yeah, I mean, you know, when I saw the list of teams that got in, and it was kind of, you go through your mind, like who's happy with their current coaching staff, their current team, stuff like that. Obviously, teams like 100 Thieves probably not making any moves. Teams like EG, I know they really love Potter over there. She's been running her system there for a while, probably not making any moves. So, you know, you start checking the boxes, and then, you know, what are you left with, right? So, obviously, it was devastating. XSET didn't get in. I was really hoping that we could continue our legacy as a full team, or maybe bring the full team elsewhere. And, you know, I just kind of was sitting there one day, and I'm like, I'm going to DM Rob. And so I went on Twitter and, hey, Rob, like, what's up? You know, basically. And
so you slid into
is
that the CEO?
Yeah, Rob Moore, CEO of Sentinels, just slid right in the DM.
And it just went from there.
Yeah, I was like, look, like, here's who I am. Here's who my team is. You know, Optics.
Always shoot your shot.
Exactly. Fuck it. Why you always shoot your shot? But yeah, like Optic had been rumored to be parting ways. So my pitch was, look, like we're the highest ranked North American team right now. Like Optic's out of the way. Like if you pick us up as a whole, and look what we did at Champions, you know, look at our consistency across the last 2 years. Look what I've done with 30% of your budget. Imagine what I could do with your budget. And within 20 minutes, he's like, you know, I'm going to get you in touch with this guy who's our head of esports. And the conversation was on from there. So,
yeah. So when that was happening, I'm assuming you were probably hoping initially that you could bring over all the guys. like I'm sure they had started to get messages and they were in talks. It seemed like Cryo got scooped up with the swiftness by 100 Thieves after XSET didn't make it.
Yeah.
But was that your hope initially? You wanted to bring everyone over?
Yeah, that was definitely, that was always plan A for me, right? Like I spent over 2 years building this team and fleshing out the systems, establishing the chemistry, developing the team and the individuals. And I really wanted to keep the whole team together. But, obviously like it's just part of the business. Like these guys are getting offers even before, like weeks before the partnership news comes out, like
Yeah.
people like 100 Thieves, if you have good players, they're in your DMs every week, it's just the way the business is, right? So,
Yeah.
you're constantly like trying to battle that and keep players happy, both financially and within the team environment and the atmosphere. And yeah, I mean, it was hard, but I really would have loved to keep Cryo and brought him over to Sentinels, but 100 Thieves to him was it's like you grow up watching the Yankees. You're like, I'm a Yankees fan, and then
Yeah.
you get drafted by the Oakland A's, and then one day the Yankees are knocking on your door. Hey, I got this contract. It's like you got to take it.
Yeah.
So,
No, I definitely know what you mean. And I'm assuming, I mean, taking Zekin over, that's like a no-brainer. I'm sure he probably had some other offers though too, right?
yeah, he had quite a few other offers for sure.
Yeah, but the project was enticing enough. And then, I mean, bringing over dephh makes sense. You guys have been working together for so long. You know how he IGLs. Yeah, I mean, does it feel bad that you weren't able to get BCJ or Aaron involved in the project?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like I said, my initial pitch was let me bring the whole team, but management really wanted to give me the freedom to build a new team, but also like have a little bit of influence over, how things went down. And
Yeah.
one of those was we only really want the one IGL, and it just happened to be that way. And then with BCJ, it was like a lot of times his name was in the conversation very heavily. Like I really enjoy BCJ as a player, like coaching him. He's one of the most coachable players I've ever coached. Really close friend, but we had the opportunity to get Sacy and pANcada as a duo, and unfortunately, like that's the route that we ended up taking. But I still think like it's actually criminal that BCJ hasn't been picked up yet, because had Sacy not come through, like BCJ would have been a no-brainer to me, especially with no
Sure.
buyout. Like he's just sitting there for free. Like
Oh, really?
one of the best initiators in the world for
Doesn't
free.
have a buyout?
No buyout.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and then
That's crazy. That is. Yeah, I mean, it's even if he did, it's still he should be on a franchise team, but that is nuts that he doesn't have a buyout and he's still floating around
Yeah.
as a free agent. But how the hell did this roster, like, who floated this idea? who like, was this all you? Was this something that the organization was already thinking about and you just co-sign? Like, because it's just it's craziness. It doesn't make any goddamn sense. So,
Yeah.
like, how did this idea begin? And like, were there scrapped ideas?
Yeah, I mean, we went through tons of lists of players and different roster combinations, and I have a pretty unique way of like viewing roles and players to like assemble like a cohesive team that checks what I see as all the boxes, and not just we need a controller player, we need an initiator player. Like I think it goes a lot deeper than that, and we went through a lot of different iterations, and it's really just Sentinels. They had they had a roster in mind that was like their first roster that included me, a couple of the XSET players, and that roster didn't end up panning out. And so from there, they kind of pivoted to, okay, now you can kind of build what you want, right? And, what do you recommend? And so I started kind of banging this out. And the first step was bringing in Kaplan as an assistant coach. And then Rory was next after that. So it was really kind of like a round table between the three of us where, we're all like pitching ideas and stuff. And, I'm like, okay, this one sounds good. This one sounds good. Let's reach out to these people. And, we reached out to a ton of people. We talked to a ton of people, but I don't know. Like I was really looking at, we really needed like a support player, like a controller player who's going to frag out. So someone like a Marv, right? But Marv didn't really want to play. He's kind of ready to take his break and retire for a bit. And, to me as a coach, like maybe I'll play, that's not really appealing. Like I want people who are hungry for it, right?
Yeah, of course.
pANcada was really interesting to me. And so we reached out to pANcada, and obviously with that to Sacy, we had just heard through the grapevine like 3 hours prior that the team was breaking up. And so we started sliding in DMs, it's just the way it goes, and shot our shot there. And sure enough, they were interested, and, just kind of panned out from there.
Yeah. And at that point, at that point you already had dephh and Zekken on board from the previous project.
Yes.
So it was like, yeah, you'd be joining up with these guys, and yeah, okay, so that makes sense. I mean, yeah, what was, I mean, kind of from I guess like Sacy and pANcada's point of view, what do you think was so appealing for them to forego continuing with that Loud team that just won champions, and to join this completely new project, not in Brazil?
Yeah. That's a tough one. And, you know, I'm sure part of that is maybe some discontent with their previous situation, you know, and what they were being offered moving forward. But, you know, I can't speak to that too much. But, you know, I think in their mind, they're moving to LA either way.
Mm.
You know, it's not like you're choosing between staying in Brazil and moving to America to play an American team. Like you got to have to move to America anyways. So I think it was just a better offer for them, you know, kind
Yeah.
of all around. Like obviously, I think they have a really good bond with their teammates. You know, Sacy and SatHack have been together forever, it feels like. I think they were just ready for something new.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, were y'all able to get any server time at all, or was it just this is the idea, you're in or you're out?
Yeah, I mean, we tossed around the idea of maybe doing scrims and stuff, like especially now that the roster's cemented. But like Tyson gets like 190 ping to Sao Paulo.
Yeah.
Sacy and pANcada get like 150, 160 to Texas. So it's like it's almost impossible. Like you really can't do much of anything. So a lot of the roster building was not at all a trial process. It was 100% scouting, and trying to piece together, like I said, based on, you know, where I saw the roles and where our needs lied.
Right. And then the only player that ended up staying from the original SEN roster is TenZ. Did you have any plans or thought on keeping any of the other guys around?
Yeah, I mean, for a while, the idea was to keep Dapper. I mean, that was what was originally presented to me from the management.
Yeah.
And it's a really great idea. I mean, I can see the chamber nerfs are coming, right? And I mean, surely, right? Please, please nerf chamber. But eventually it will happen. And then someone like Dapper, their stock goes through the roof, right? So, you know, having him around to continue playing initiator until moving into a sentinel role was something really appealing to me. But when the Sacy pANcada duo presented itself, it was a situation where that kind of just pushed him out of the way for these two, right? Because we can't just get pANcada. pANcada's English is serviceable and you can communicate with him and he can be a part of team practice and crack jokes and stuff, but it's not as conversational as Sacy. So we needed both of them so that Sacy could be a bit of a mediator or translator,
Right.
For this initial stage. Not to mention Sacy is just absolutely incredible, right? It's not like we just brought him as a translator, right? Like he's a phenomenal player himself, and you know, in my eyes, edged out Dapper a bit, at least in the initiator role, and we still have dephh who can move over to Sentinel.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely seems like a case of having a lot of good options, but as soon as you get that caliber of Sacy and pANcada, it just trumps everything, even though there were feasible other good options available. With keeping TenZ though, that is the big question mark of this project to me. And I don't say that meaning that I don't understand why you kept him, or I couldn't see why you kept him. But I think I mean that more so that I think he's like an unquantifiable entity on this team, because what we saw from him and the Sentinels team in all the rest of this year was just chaos. So I feel like it's impossible to accurately place where he kind of ranks, where his current skill level is at, but also like where his drive is at. It's been so hard to tell who on Sentinels is really caring. Other than, I mean, I always felt like Dapper was kind of that guy, even throughout all of their troubles. And you kind of end up thinking with TenZ, like, is he just a victim of this team's poor mentality and the system that he finds himself within? Or is he simultaneously not doing enough himself to succeed with this roster in this previous year? But like, so I guess all that being said, like what are you weighing up when you decided to keep him, and what pushed you over the edge into doing so?
Yeah, I think it comes down to a couple things. I think the first thing I was thinking about was, when it comes to those roles I was talking about, like having somebody who's a primary sniper, who's gonna be insanely mechanically gifted at that level and be able to compete at the top level against people like artists, people like Cryo, people like, any of these Durka, any of these top snipers that are out there. Like there's only a handful of them, really. I think ideally I would have loved to keep Cryo. Obviously, that was, like the initial plan is to keep as many XSET players as possible. I know all about Cryo's intangibles. I know how coachable he is. I know how talented he is. I know where his strengths and weaknesses are. It's the familiarity, right? Like that combined with, obviously, he's one of the top players in the world at the moment. I would have loved to have kept him. But when that door closed, now you're left with just a handful of players who can really compete at that level, right? Ye, I chatted with him a bit, but he ended up getting a phenomenal offer from Cloud9 that he just couldn't turn down, right? And we talked to some other people. We were talking to, even artists. I reached out to Safe. There's a couple other people that, I was interested in, but at the end of the day, like there's really only that like handful of like 5 to 8 like top level snipers, and they all have like incredibly high buyouts. So if you look at someone like Tyson, obviously he's demonstrated in the past that he has the mechanics. Like he has what it takes when it comes to clicking on heads or with a sniper clicking on bodies, right? Like he has that mechanical gift. His reaction times are insane. All that stuff it's really hard to take somebody like mid to high level and teach them to be that top tier aimer. Whereas if you know someone has the mechanics, but maybe they're lacking in another area like communication or drive to succeed or drive to participate, like those are coachable qualities, right? So I looked at Tyson as, if we can harness this stud of like firepower and like inspire him to want to like come in every day and do his best and give his most for his teammates, and surround him with people who are working hard every day, surround him with coaches who are going to work with him individually and as a team every day, we may be able to get him back to where he was, or even push him further than what we ever saw with the original Sentinels roster. So the step one to that was just getting in a call with him, and I had calls with all of the previous Sentinels members, or most of them, Shroud, Shazam, all these guys, to kind of paint this picture of
No Shroud?
We'll get to that one. To paint this picture of like what the old roster was, like what the problems were, like get everybody's input on like each other. And my big thing was Tyson was it definitely seemed like there was some sort of like lack of drive. And so I said, like, I just want to get in the call with him. And if he can convince me that he wants this and he's willing to put in this effort and take part in this new system and buy into what we want to do here, which is just work hard and win and bring home trophies, then I will take a chance on him. And so, we got in that phone call, and one of the first things he said was, I didn't even have to prompt it. He said, look, I know there's this public perception of me that I don't want to work hard, that I don't want to compete. I just want to be a streamer. And I just want you to know that that is false. I want to win. I want to compete. And he kind of, just said, I wasn't really happy with how the last roster was going, like how the system, the atmosphere was. But if I'm surrounded by people who want to succeed, like I was saying, I will put in the work and I will be the player you need me to be. And I walked away from that conversation feeling confident that he meant what he was saying, and confident in my ability as a coach and Kaplan's ability as a coach, and our unannounced assistant coach's ability as a coach as well to develop this player and drive him. And that was it. I don't think that there's anybody else out there that is going to match his level of mechanics. He's already on the team. He's not a buyout player. He has what it takes. I can craft him to be what I need him to be, and I think it's going to work out well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. I think the player that is probably, from what I've seen at least, getting the most criticism, maybe, or doubt, however you want to put it, is bringing dephh into the team. And I think, to some extent, I think that comes from a misguided place from a lot of people, where they're overly concerned with individual performance. But I suppose I will put you on the spot to defend dephh in regards to people talking about how in XSET he was IGLing for just the attack sides, and Aaron was the IGL for the defensive sides. What would you say in regard to that criticism.
Yeah, I think that's fair, but I also, it's not like we brought in Aaron to offset dephs. Like CT calling Aaron was already there. He had experience calling in Crossfire.
Yeah.
We brought in Rory to IGL XSET, right? And at the time, Thwyfo was actually calling the CT sides, and we brought in Rory to call the T sides. And when we got rid of Thwyfo, man, I'm like fumbling over his. When we got rid of Xander, I'm not even gonna say Thwyfo anymore. It opened up that CT calling side, and Rory, was calling both sides, but it was really just a matter of experimentation. Like let's try and utilize all of our pieces. Let's try and free up Rory to be a little bit more individual as a side anchor on smokes on CT side, and really just mixing and matching things. And it wasn't that Rory was failing to call on CT side or CT calling was bad. It's just we were working with all the tools that we had at our disposal and trying to min max as best as possible. I think that both Jordan and Rory are both incredible callers that can call on either side of the map. And I actually think, well, I know I'm really excited to see the global esports roster with Jordan on it, competing in Seoul. I think that he has the potential to really dominate that region with his IGL ability. And I think that both Jordan and Rory have learned a lot from each other. So, there's no concern on my end in Rory's ability to IGL both sides. I understand other concerns like people have. You're right. There is this like misconception of like an IGL. The best IGLs are the ones putting up like big numbers. Like in stage 1 of this year when Xander was calling for version 1 and was putting up big individual numbers, and everybody was like, he's the best IGL ever because has a lot of ACS. And
Yeah.
that's not necessarily how that works, right? Like your ability to lead a team in game, your ability to default, get information, call rotations, micromanage the pieces on your chessboard, really important qualities that you can't really quantify through stats. And people don't really get a good insight into how these individual teams operate because you can't see, people don't release full comms videos because that would be counterintuitive to the competitive nature of what we do, right? So it's even hard for me as a coach to like envision what impact other IGLs have on teams that we're competing against, and especially for the average viewer to just really get the mental picture of what these IGLs are doing and how much more work goes into it than just how they perform with their crosshair.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I would guess as well that part of one of the positive aspects of keeping the duo of both you and dephh around too is that and I suppose you can just tell me if you feel this way as well, is that I think both of you guys have an air of maturity around you, especially in a not just in respect to like the scene skews younger, but just personality wise, how you both are. I feel like you're both very level headed and calm. Despite people are now going to say, but what about when dephh said the thing about optic at the event or whatever? But
Yeah.
And then immediately apologized for that and recognized he was out of line,
Right.
which goes in line with what I'm saying. But do you agree with that sentiment?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I noticed almost immediately when I was trialing dephh back in XSET that we complemented each other well in terms of personality and leadership style. Everything that I brought to the table in terms of leadership outside of the game, like I'm a very hands-on leader. I'm not really the coach just kind of sitting in the corner and like, hey guys, you should run this strategy. Like I'm every day, hey guys, welcome. Hey, you're 30 seconds late. Hey, this is what we're going to do today. Here's the game plan. Here's where we're going to meet. Make sure you're on time. Like I'm very hands-on when it comes to that stuff. And as hands-on and confident and well-rounded as I was outside of the server, I saw the same with Rory inside of the server. And we matched very well in terms of like how we approached leadership, how we approached like getting things done in general, and just like how to conduct ourselves, like you were saying. And, we meshed very well there, and we have a really deep, playbook, both inside and outside the server when it comes to like strategy to run, practice environment, like practice strategy, like how to go about structuring a team, and in bringing Rory over, we get to retain a lot of that. It's not starting from square one and rebuilding the foundation of the trust between the coach and the IGL, and establishing a practice structure, establishing a brand new playbook. Like we get to bring a lot of it over, and that's not to say that everything we're going to be doing as XSET. It's just saying that we get a bit of a head start over some of these other teams that have to start over.
Right. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. I suppose then just generally, do you feel that dephh is underrated then by community analysts, whatever?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, like you said, there's just too much focus on like individual statistics. And I think that you can look at just the consistency of our team and see that what we're doing as leaders is working, both in and out of the server. And Rory's like impact in how consistent we are in the server is extremely understated. And, you know, we have a great team, we have great players, and I don't want to like take credit away from anybody else or take credit away from Jordan, who's been doing a phenomenal job IGLing and being a captain and a leader outside of the server as well. But just that perfect storm of everything together made us truly great. And, you know, I don't think that enough credit gets passed to either Jordan or Rory for all of the things that we accomplished at XSET.
Yeah. It definitely felt to me at a point, I think it was around when XSET, when you guys qualified for Copenhagen, it felt to me like you guys were very frustrated with, I mean, I suppose you could tell me where the frustration was pointed towards if you do feel that was the case, because that was around when I was seeing you guys, like a lot of the players and maybe even you yourself were posting things like essentially saying like, time for everyone to stop fucking underrating us.
Mm-hmm.
This is proof that we're good. And also you guys just kind of had an attitude shift at the time too, where players started kind of like talking trash and it felt like there was more personality coming out from the team. What changed around that time period that made you guys feel this sort of frustration that ended up coming out in these ways?
I don't know if it's anything specific to the time. I think it was just a long stewing, like cooking it up slowly in the crock pot for 2 years of being on an organization that supported us phenomenally well, treated us well.
Yeah.
Marco Moreau, who was the COO and head of esports for the longest time at XSET, is truly like industry standard when it comes to like running things and treating people well. But from a clout perspective, right? XSET didn't offer the team and players as much as some of these other organizations. And for that reason, we were always looked at as like, no matter how good we did, no matter how consistent we were always, I don't know, you guys said this all the time, the perennial underdog, right? Like we were always the underdog, no matter, even if we were the favorites going in statistically on paper, we were the underdog because who the fuck is XSET?
Yeah.
I think a lot of that came from, or a lot of what happened towards Copenhagen came from my methodology of like, don't go out and just like smack talk. Like, don't go out and just be overly confident, like stay humble and do what needs to be done until we win. And then once we win, we can like talk our talk. And so that was it, is we won the national title and the players were like, all right, like coach said, this is the moment I can talk my talk. I'm the best initiator in the world, this and that. And
BCJ went crazy.
Yeah. So like, I think they were ready for that moment. It's like, we kept working, like climbing. Finally, we're number one and people are like, yeah, but like, are they really that good? And it's like, we just won the fucking national title against Optic. What do you mean? Are they really that good? So I understand why the players like felt that way for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Do you feel like it went a little overboard, or do you think that people just reacted to it? Or do you think the reaction to it was overboard?
I think the reaction to it was overboard, but I think it was also the context that it was like displayed to the public, because we won that Optic match and then immediately had a press conference within like an hour of winning a national title. Obviously the players are jacked up.
Right.
I'm the best, you know, we did this, stop sleeping on us. And, you know, all that stuff was said like in one press conference an hour after we won a national title. And then it was released in bits, like days, weeks at a time after that, between this and Copenhagen, while journalists and podcasters and everything were getting their sound bites in and getting those clicks and views. And it just made it look like we like won and then just like shit talked to everybody for 4 weeks. And that just wasn't the case. Like it was just, we won, we were hyped. Everybody was like, yeah. I can't wait to play this team. I think that we could beat this team. And then that was it. And then we kind of simmered on it and everybody else kind of rolled with it.
Yeah. It ended up being, there's sort of an irony to it, because you guys never got much public shine despite being ultra consistent top 4 forever. So no one really, I don't think people really knew what your team or your players or your personality were like. And then the first widespread introduction was the trash talk, which is just also so, like, I know, because I know BCJ and you guys, that it's like coming from there's an element of joking to it as well, that it's being hammed up. Like, you guys are all super friendly. So it was so silly from my perspective to see that, like, you guys took on the role of being villains when you're actually like the nicest motherfuckers around in the scene. So that was just kind of crazy. But I get it. I mean, I imagine it was, that like, so before Copenhagen, was that something you guys discussed with each other? Like your feelings on not getting the shine that other teams did, even worse teams than you guys, and was that something? I mean, I'm sure that was like fueling you guys to some extent, but was that like a present thing that you guys would talk about?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't like we come into practice and we're just like talking about this and how are we going to change this and this and that. It would come up every once in a while, like, man, I can't believe people are hamming this team up, or I can't believe this team is getting credit and we just won and this and that. And it's like every once in a while, it's like offhanded conversation, towards each other, but it was never like a consistent thing where we were stewing over this in practice every day and feeling resentful and thinking of like, what can we do to change this? It wasn't really like at the forefront of our minds, right? Like, our thing was, we're here to win. Like we're here to compete. We're here to be the best. We don't care about like doing content or streaming or comms videos or this and that. And obviously, like, in hindsight, a lot of that stuff kind of bit us in terms of like people getting to know our personality and stuff. So, but yeah, even after Copenhagen, it was like, or even after stage 2 going into Copenhagen, all eyes were on Copenhagen. Like, we have to perform well on stage. We're prepping all these teams. We have to be ready for this different level of competition. And we weren't really thinking about, clout and likes and who's talking about who, like we joke about that stuff. Like, can't believe they're yada, yada, but all eyes are on the competition for me.
Yeah. Do you think that had, because I feel like you're very aware of the psychological and kind of emotional aspects of the team and players and how to get the most out of them in regards to those aspects of competition. It's just like, I suppose, life generally. Do you think that attitude shift played a part in what happened at Copenhagen? Do you think that the players inadvertently put too much pressure on themselves by getting the spotlight on them?
I think maybe individually in some situations with certain players, yes, but I think for the most part, like, what went wrong in Copenhagen was gonna happen anyways. Even if we went in that press conference and we said, I'm just here so I don't get fined, and like walked out, I think we still would have went in Copenhagen and gotten O2'd, because the issues we ran into were really surrounding like match day preparation. Like, we went through a lot of this throughout the seasons the last 2 years, like getting to a point where we knew exactly like what time do we need to wake up, what do we need to eat, what do we need to do for warm up, how many warm up scrims, how close are these warm up scrims to when we play, like what else are we doing to complement or offset the in-game warm up, to warm up our minds, warm up our voices, warm up the atmosphere. And we didn't get to do any of that at Copenhagen. We kind of came in not knowing what to expect. Didn't have a whole lot of time to warm up. You're on the shuttle, you're in this practice room that's like 90 degrees Fahrenheit, like trying to warm up and stuff. And I'm in a suit, like sweating my ass off, like trying my best to like be a manager while also coaching my team. And, it was a lot of chaos. And, I think the lessons that we learned in Copenhagen were invaluable to us and obviously carried over well into Champions. But, I think a lot of it, the stress on stage, the uncomfortability would have happened regardless of the public perception. I think the guys are pretty good at like separating that aspect of it and not really allowing themselves to think about it, right?
Yeah. Is that something that you try to instill in them, or something that you try to give advice on as the coach, like in regards to dealing with the social pressure and the commentary and the negative just shit getting hurled at them constantly?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my personal guidelines or rules when it comes to like social media and stuff is obviously I'm on Twitter a lot, but I'm not in the like message requests often. I don't go on Reddit. I don't go on VLR forums. Like it's not healthy, right? Like you get into if you're a player and you're like doing well and you start seeing yourself talked about on Reddit and VLR and you get into this like positive feedback loop of like, oh, people are saying good things about me. And then one day you play bad and you go on Reddit and they're saying bad things about you. It gets in your head. Especially for these younger players. So I try and push them away from that and say, like, you have to tune that out. It's not important. Like, these people don't know what you know. They're not at your level. They don't have the level of understanding or context that you have for what's going on. They're never going to have like pristine, great input. So even that positive input that they're giving you when you're doing great is not necessarily healthy. And some players are better at it than others. Like especially the younger players, they get really sucked into the social media side of things. But I also kind of guide them in how to process those feelings and um, how to keep that out of mind while competing, because like the main thing you need to be focusing on is competing, right? You look in your monitor, you get absorbed by what's going on. You really live in the moment of the game that you're playing, and it doesn't really matter what people are thinking about you.
Yeah. What have the challenges been, and I suppose what have you learned from it then, like coaching younger players? Because you're on a team with your star player is Zekin, who's 17 now,
Yeah.
and was 16 when he first joined.
Yeah,
Is that the
freshly
case?
16.
Yeah. So yeah, again, I guess what were the challenges with that, and as a coach, and what did you learn from this experience?
Yeah, I mean, every player needs a different methodology. As a coach, you teach your team with a certain teaching method, like at a top level, but then individually you have to approach each player differently. Like, younger players, you have to be a little bit more careful and cautious and soft, I guess, with them. Whereas someone like dephh, like he's a 30-year-old man. Like if he's fucking up, I have to tell him, hey, stop fucking up.
Yeah.
Look me in the eyes, stop fucking
Yeah.
up, right? So it's different, right? But the younger players, Rory says this a lot. It's a TikTok generation. Like if you're not containing your thoughts into a 10-second like soundbite, they're lost. They're pulling up Twitter. They're in aim labs. They're in the range. They're jumping around, swinging their knife around. They don't give a fuck what you have to say after 10 seconds. So you have to like really like be concise and get your point across really shortly.
Yeah. That's pretty funny. But yeah, I mean, that does make sense. I mean, what about you, or I guess your life experiences, do you think kind of guided you into this position that you're now in as a coach?
Man, I could not have predicted this path ever. I think it's really just I've done a bit of everything, right? Like I went to a military high school, like I learned leadership early. I went into music. I toured the world. Like I met not the world, United States, North America. I met all kinds of people. Got into all kinds of situations. Saw all different like aspects and points of view. You got to pick a lot of different people's brains from across the country, and from there went into IT. I was an engineer by nature, so things like strategy, things like dissecting things and seeing the bigger picture, as well as the micro parts is something that comes naturally to me. But also going into IT management, again, leading a team, like knowing how to maximize the pieces that you have and, really be like a diplomat and not somebody who's just kind of dictating, hey, you do this, hey, you do this. It's really like, hey, how can we approach this together? What are all your different insights? And, everybody around you like has a unique perspective and has their own individual intellectuality, especially in an industry like this, and being able to recognize that and draw from it and really like be a collaborative leader, I think is key to being an esports coach. I think a lot of people try and go into this and say, we're going to run my strategy and I'm going to tell you what to do. And it's really less about that and more about all of you guys are incredibly smart. And if I can channel that and be the person who mediates the conversations and guides us towards where we need to be, that's really what these guys need. and knowing how to identify individually with the younger guys and the older guys and get the best and most out of each of them is really what I think makes me individually a great coach.
Yeah. I mean, a couple of things from that. Wait, first of all, what was the thing you were doing when you were touring the United States?
Oh,
Like,
I played drums.
oh, really?
I toured in a lot of like low level bands, just like DIY and low level touring bands, like primarily like pop punk. Toured in a ska band for a while.
Really?
Yeah.
When was that?
2010-ish to 2014-ish.
That's awesome. And then, yeah, you did that. Then you went into IT management, and then I'm assuming the whole time you were just a gaming enthusiast.
Yeah, I mean, when I was a kid, I played like COD 4 Pro Mod, America's Army 2. You know, I was playing these games at the top level where there's no money. If you're a top 8 team in, you know, COD 4.
I know all about
2008.
That.
You're not making any money.
That.
Yeah. So unless you're Rob Wiz, you're not making money in Call of Duty. So there was no money in it back then, but I was always an avid player. I always was fairly good at video games. And then throughout all of this, I kept playing like casually, competitively, you know, trying to play in leagues when I could.
Right. And then because I remember you joined Pretty Boys before you were signed to XSET. That was in like September 2020.
Yeah.
And so what happened then that got you into that role with that team at the time?
Before that, so I guess it goes back to Battalion 1944. You know, I was working IT jobs, and this game Battalion came out, and it was like all the people from the COD 4 Pro Mod community consisted of like 80% of the new Battalion community. It was all like old men reliving their dreams, you know, in this game.
Yep.
And so it kind of pulled me back in, and, you know, I realized, wow, I fucking love esports. Like, I like IT, I like being an engineer, but I love gaming. And I was a player at the time, and I got an offer to coach like what was at the time the best Battalion team, and they transitioned over to VALORANT when Battalion died, because it just kind of died out of nowhere. And so day one of beta, I was coaching VALORANT for Battalion players, and from there got onto Lazarus. It was kind of like a low mid-tier org, and could never really get anything going there because the budget and investment wasn't there. But it got me in the door and allowed me to meet a lot of people, including who was at the time the manager for Pretty Boys. And this guy, Jason, introduced me to Dwifo, and Dwifo said, look, like, I'm trying to build this team for XSET.
Yeah.
I'm struggling. Like, I'm a 17-year-old kid, 18-year-old kid. Like, I need to bring in somebody who's going to like lead these guys and help me put them together. And that's exactly what I did. I came in, I brought in a couple other people, rounded out the roster, and we were signed to XSET.
Yeah. That's very cool. I didn't know all the, I like learning the lore. The backstory. But yeah, I mean, I think I said it earlier, like, I feel like and kind of as to what you were saying, yeah, I think I feel like you're very tapped into the emotional side of players and how they feel in the competition. Like, there was the clip I remember seeing at Copenhagen after the team had been, I'm not sure if it was after the first loss or after you had been eliminated, but there was like a clip of you talking to a very dejected-looking Zekin.
Oh yeah, the Zekin clip.
Yeah, he was taking the loss hard, and you know, you were there as an emotional leader. And I suppose I'm wondering, how do you balance being this, you know, not only coaching the game but this emotional leader for the team, and also balance that with being like a family man and a father? I mean, that just seems like a lot to have on your plate. How do you find a way to balance all that?
It helps having a really supportive partner. You know, my girlfriend and I have been together over 7 years now, and she's really allowed me to chase this dream by like stepping up and taking a lot of the man hours when it comes to you know, parenting while I'm doing this, right? And that's not to say I'm not an involved parent. Like, that's the benefit of esports, is you get to work from home a lot of the time. So, you know, I do get to spend probably way more time with my daughter than someone who goes to an office and works 9 to 5 does. But she really steps up as well and is extremely supportive of like where we move in, where we travel, and what am I doing to offset and allow me to chase this dream. And, you know, even going back to Pretty Boys, like while I was assembling this roster on Pretty Boys, I was still working at Microsoft 40 hours a week, 45 hours a week sometimes. So
God damn.
I'm trying to balance like a full-time job, chasing this, like what at the time was like a passion hobby, and being a parent. And, she really stepped up to allow me to do that. And luckily, when I got onto XSET, I was making enough money that I could step away from Microsoft and, do this full time. But yeah, I also do think that being a parent and having that emotional growth throughout the parenting process, and like having a young daughter and understanding how to relate to her, has also helped me a lot in being an emotional leader and being more in touch with, especially the younger kids, right? Because Zekin is very young. When he comes to tournaments, his mom comes with us. She's
Yeah.
she's basically a part of the team. She's extremely supportive, and you know, hey coach, make sure he gets in bed by XYZ. Like, yeah, Mama Z, I got you. So it is like being a dad sometimes in practice. Even to Rory's a couple months older than me, but sometimes I feel like I have to be Rory's dad in order to make sure the team progresses and things get taken care of and people treat each other with respect and talk out their problems and all this good stuff that comes with parenting, but also comes with coaching.
Yeah. And I think there's, with everything you just said, I feel like one of the very wholesome aspects of XSET was that you guys had a very familial feel.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just within the players. Like, I see your parents supporting you and
Mhm.
like vocally supporting, and BCJ, and I mean there's plenty of pictures where I would see like you with your significant other and your daughter, and like out
Yeah.
to dinner with the guys, and like BCJ and Cryo. Um, and yeah, I mean, I imagine all that just makes it that much harder to say goodbye to that project and close it out.
Yeah, it definitely does. The end of XSET is something that I've been kind of, I even realized, when you get older, I'm 30 years old now, you're much more in tune with like your own emotions and your feelings. And I kind of woke up a couple weeks ago and I was like, you know what, I'm depressed. And I kind of went through the process of like, why am I depressed? And I think it really came down to this team was coming to a close, and it was like really emotional for me, especially, I'm going to be able to stay around with Zach and Rory, but the rest of these guys, like, we're going our separate ways. Like the family that was here is separating. And as much as you want to say like we'll stay in touch, we'll stay close, we'll still be friends. Like, it's hard to maintain those friendships at that level, that family connection at that level, when you're not seeing somebody and interacting with them every day like you were in the way that we were before. Because we definitely put a big emphasis on, this is a family, right? Like, this isn't just a coworker situation. We're not just clocking in, clocking out. I don't like check collectors. I don't like people that come in and do the bare minimum. Like, everybody here wants to win. Everybody here enjoys each other. They work through their problems. We never walk away from practice at the end of the day like upset with each other. That's something that I'm really big on, like both in my individual relationships in real life as well as our relationships in the team. So yeah, it was really hard. It's still very hard to even talk about it. Like, I feel like quembling a little bit, but yeah, I think that XSET will hold like a very large place in my heart and probably all the players' hearts for a very long time, just due to how close we all were.
Yeah. And I mean, I imagine as well that's part of the reason why you feel that the team was so successful and able to overcome a lot of adversity,
Mhm.
especially within the last few months of the team's run.
Yeah.
Specifically, that time period between Copenhagen and Champions, which I mean that surely had to be the lowest point, I would imagine, for you guys, is when you were leaving Copenhagen, returning home from that event, um, going out 0-2. What was that like for you to have to manage? I suppose emotionally, for yourself and for the then how do you like check in on your own feelings after that result and all the pressure that came with it and all of the social stuff and everything piling on top of that? How do you deal with that individually and have time for that, but also make sure that you're checking in on the players and making sure that everyone is okay and ready to move forward?
Yeah, that one was really hard for me, especially individually, because I caught Copenhagen at the end of
Oh yeah,
Copenhagen.
same. I mean, everybody did back then. That event was just not not good. The CDC does not approve of that Copenhagen event at all.
That was crazy because I feel like the guidelines and structures in place were pretty top notch, but just for whatever reason, people got sick. So I don't know. It's like you took that pot and you dumped in the Copenhagen and like sitting in your room like alone, and then you dump in the O2 loss and you start mixing it all up, and it's like this perfect like stew of like delicious depression, right? So you know, it's definitely hard. But I'm older, like I know how to kind of process it, and I know how to like, you know, as a man, you stuff it down, right? Deep down, and then you focus on the people around you, right? And them first, and I'll deal with myself later. That's just kind of like that selfless aspect of like trying my best to just make sure my team's okay before I even think about myself. But you know, we kind of went into Copenhagen saying this is our first international event and we already qualified a champion. So I even said in the beginning, and it wasn't like a let's sandbag in case we don't do well and then we have an excuse. It was like, this really is like a first trial run for us. We've already qualified to champions. That's the one that matters. Not to say that Masters doesn't matter, but champions is champions. It's worlds. Like that's the one you want to win. So let's use this experience at Copenhagen, do the best we possibly can, and then take all those lessons and dump them into the champs and make sure that we have a good champs run. So it's pretty much what I said at the end of it. Is like, look, we said from the beginning this was a trial run. We knew we were going to face adversity. You know, it's all about turning these losses into lessons, and really making the most of this experience, despite the fact that we did poorly according to our own expectations and the expectations of others. You know, we still learned a lot. And I always tell the team, like, it's okay to be sad. Like, if you're eating an O2 loss in an international LAN and then going home and you're like, yeah, I'm happy, I'm going to like go out and party. Like, you either don't care about competition or you're a sociopath. Like, you have to have emotions. Like, if something happens in your life and you're not sad about it, something's wrong. So, you know, go home, be sad, process through it. Let's take a week off, you know, like reset, and then let's get back to work, you know, figure out what went wrong and figure out how we're going to fix it. And luckily we have a really resilient team that did exactly that. We came back into practice about a week later and started going through our match VODs. We really identified a lot of these issues when it came to like match day preparation and routines and comfortability on stage. And we just grinded it out, man. Like those couple weeks before Poland, and especially that week in Poland, like we worked harder than we've ever worked. We had more discourse, more heated conversations than we've ever had. But every day we walked away from those conversations with a consensus. Like, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to handle this situation. This is a strategy we're going to run. Like, even if it took some discourse and some heated discussion to get there, we got there and we felt everybody's voices were heard, and that we came to the conclusion that's going to get us the most success. And obviously, you know, we didn't win champions, but I felt we did extremely well, you know, when it comes to the rest of the teams, I guess. Yeah.
I mean, that was the champions run was very impressive. I mean, certainly a good way to, I suppose, cap off kind of do you feel that? Do you feel that you capped off the like that chapter in the Valorant history book where we look back to the pre-franchise days and we see XSET? Do you feel content with where you guys ended up?
Yeah, that's a tough question. Obviously, like, I prefer leaving off here and not right after Copenhagen. Like, if that was the cutoff, like we win the national title, but then we bomb out internationally, like that would have been really hard to walk away right there. Obviously, like recouping, rallying back, and having a good showing at champions allowed me to walk away from this whole thing a lot more content. But I do think that if there was one more international event after this, that with the lessons we learned at champions and the confidence that we had, I think that we could have done even better. You know, maybe that's the case, maybe it's not. It's kind of just that unknown of leaving off, you know, at a high point and not waiting until the project starts to depreciate and players start getting cut and then the whole roster's cut. Like, nobody likes going out that way. It's always better to go out when you're moderately or pretty successful. So definitely happy walking away where we're at. It just sucks that it was forced, but you know, I'm glad it was there and not right after Copenhagen.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think was the toughest thing to change from Copenhagen to champions? What was the the highest hurdle that needed to be leapt over for you guys to find success?
Hmm. I'm not sure. Um, I really think it came to gaining that confidence on stage. We do a lot of, like, we lived in the team house, right? Like, I didn't, but I lived down the street, but a lot of the players lived in the team house. The other players flew out and competed in the team house in the practice room. Like, we're used to competing in an environment where we're near each other, and not in the comfort of our own like individual bedrooms. Like, I did a lot of stuff to like prepare the team even before Copenhagen. Like, let's play with our in-ear monitors on. Let's play with our headsets over our in-ears and practice. Like, our ears are going to hurt. You just have to get used to it. You know, stuff like that, like shaking the tables, walking around behind them, like nudging them, trying to like take them out of their element. But you really can't prepare for what it's like on stage until you're actually there on stage and just grinding out those reps and really realizing what it is like being across from the enemy and seeing them and competing in that way. Like, I think those were the most invaluable lessons we took away from Copenhagen. And so we really knew how to buckle down in between Copenhagen and champs and really just hone in on that. We saw that, especially in like scrimming, like in Copenhagen, like some of the other teams in Europe and even some of the teams in the event, like we knew that we had individually, mechanically, as a team, strategy wise, we had all of these things that would allow us to win on stage. It just came down to who was better on the day, who was more comfortable, who made the least mistakes. And the amount of mistakes that we made in Copenhagen was just off the charts, man. Like, compared to any other match we've ever played, like just mistake after mistake after mistake. And that comes to your mind is just not in a comfortable place. And so we did a lot to again, practice with in-ears, practice with the white noise, but also like, let's practice having different kind of warm-ups on different days. Let's hone in on what gets us warmed up, what gets us confident. And yeah, I think that's the thing that we really had to drill in the most before Champions.
Were all of the, like, the walkouts and the little silly bits and all that, was that kind of a purposeful effort from you to get people in a fun mood?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I told everybody, like, and it kind of is a callback to what we were talking about earlier. Like, this is your moment to show your personality. Like, people want to see what you're like. They don't just want you to come out and Zekin, and then you like walk to your seat. Like, no one
the classic gamer arm cross.
Yeah, no one wants to see that, man. Like, do something
Gamers
fun.
have been crossing their arms way too much since, I mean, that's just the classic pose.
Yeah,
every team photo, 5 guys with their arms crossed.
Yeah, man. Like, it's boring.
Yeah.
You know, people will be excited to see you, but they'll be more excited if you're having fun. And then the other aspect of that is what you touched on, which is, you know, it gets the mood in a correct spot. And that's a lot of what I was doing going into champs, is trying every day to make sure that everybody's in the right mood. If that means I have to be the class clown and like act a fool and make some jokes and get raunchy and shit talk the other team and do the thing with my sunglasses and shush the crowd and stuff like that, like, I'll do that all day. I don't care. And it's all serves a purpose to detract like the attention and pressure away from the player and put it on myself. If the enemy team wants to smack talk or look badly at someone, look at me. You know, you see me up there, like, we're playing Optic and I'm like shit talking crashies on the stage. Like, I love doing that stuff because it takes the pressure away from these guys. And they're sitting there laughing at what I'm doing. You know, not in like, I can't believe he's doing that. Oh, but like, that's hilarious. He keep doing that. That's funny. You know, like, they love that shit. So yeah, like the banana gun, the sunglasses, the walkout. Second was going to do something where he slid down and it didn't end up working out, but it all like goes into this. Let's get the energy and the atmosphere warmed up. Let's get cracking jokes so that once we get up on stage, we're lighthearted, we're in a good mood, and it's a lot easier to be confident.
Yeah. I mean, that's also with you wearing the suit every time you're at an event. That's purposeful as well, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's all a confidence thing. You know, if I'm coming up and I'm walking out like that, I'm like, you know, I'm very much like a lead from the front guy. Like, in practice, in boot camp, in events, I'm the first one walking off the bus. You know, I'm wearing the suit. I'm inspiring that confidence. Like, we're here to do business. We're ready to go. Like, this is our moment, kind of thing. Like, and it's not just me either. Like, if you look at the players, like, I have them, they're wearing the same joggers, the same like $200 Adidas Ultra Boost shoes. And then you got the other team over there, and like one's wearing shorts, one's wearing blue jeans and shit like that.
Yeah.
And it all plays into that. Like you dress for success, like you
Right.
dress confident, you feel confident, you are confident, right? And I just want these guys to go on stage and be as confident as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like you've done a good job of balancing the dichotomy between fun and seriousness, which is kind of the key, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, you need to be there to win, but especially in a game like Valorant, I think it's so easy to lose the confidence and then lose it all.
Yeah. If you're sitting there like, I have to make the perfect play, I have to make the perfect decision every time, then you really turtle up and you stop wanting to take risks or make plays at all. And it puts you into this very readable position where you're just a stagnant player that's not ever going to take a risk or catch somebody off guard. You're easy to read and easy to run it down on. So, these guys need to be in a mindset where, yeah, I do need to make the right decisions, but I also have to trust my gut and my intuition, which is, that's what we're grinding out in practice. Is like I always say, trust your gut, because we've just spent the last 6 months training your gut to know what to do. And so if they're confident and they're thinking about what they want to do and not thinking about, oh, I'm uncomfortable, I'm on the stage, oh, there's so much pressure on me, like, you can make way better decisions.
Yeah, for sure. And at that event as well, do you have any feelings of wishing you did anything different in regard to that whole situation with the bug and the replay from the from the turret? Context being that Riot had you and FPX replay the final round of the game due to a turret bug, and then there was a bit of a delay that he played. Are you okay with how everything ended up happening with that, or is there anything you wish you may have done differently?
I mean, I just wish it hadn't happened, right? Like, I think
Yeah.
that's the only thing that we can really take away from this is like, damn, I wish that bug hadn't have happened. It was a tough situation because we didn't ask to replay it, nor were we like asked, like, do you want to replay this? It was, hey, like, we're pulling you into this room, and then they sat us in this room for a while, and you literally see it in this thing XSET put out recently. I'm talking to the guys like, hey, good season, great job, I'm really proud of all of you. And then this Riot employee walks in like, hey, we're gonna replay the round, and it is what it is. And then they pulled me and Rory over to talk to Doombros and Angel, and it was very clear that Angel was not happy about it. But even then, the Riot employee was like, look, this is us. We're telling you guys to replay this. They didn't ask for it. They don't have an option. You don't have an option. This is what's happening. And it happened from there, right? Like, there's not much more we could do other than maybe like make a statement and refuse to play. But I think that's so weird for people to expect of us to even think about doing, let alone actually do, especially when there's rules in place that prevent us from doing that to begin with.
Yeah, I said this on Plat Chat, but I feel like there's too much of an expectation for people to be able to navigate these complex situations perfectly in the moment, when communication is very little, and there's also a lot of younger people involved. And I feel like in the press conference that happened after the fact, I felt like you and Rory were both very calm and mature in that situation. I felt like you handled it about as well as you could have, being put into a very uncomfortable and difficult to navigate position after finishing this game, and the adrenaline's going crazy. And
plus it's like
you just get hit with a crazy twist after you think it's over. It was a very odd, very odd situation. But yeah, I guess to kind of take it back to where I mentioned earlier, like that September 2020, getting involved till now. How do you feel like you've grown in this experience of being with XSET?
I think coming into any kind of job like this, you have a lot of like imposter syndrome, especially because there's not a lot of resources to become an esports coach. And that's something that I've thought about a lot. And like, I'm not someone who's really interested in doing content. Like, I'd much rather like compete and win, right? But even if I wanted to do content and had that time and motivation to do so, it's still like I was saying earlier, it's like counterintuitive to the competitive process to reveal like how I think about situations, how I structure my practices, anything that would give an enemy coach insight into how XSET or how Sentinels now um, operates is going to be negative, right? But I think because of that, a lot of coaches are very hesitant to like put out any sort of content that shows how to be a coach or to take on like students or interns or whatever and allow them to sit into the practice environment. So, as a new coach, you're really just kind of making it up as you go. And I think that everybody kind of goes through that unless they're lucky enough to get an assistant coach job with somebody who's been doing it for a while. And I think a lot of what I realized is, as a esports, like not observer, but a fan, like spectator, I was always kind of like, oh, I could make a better decision than that, or I could do this, I could do that. But then you think, oh, well, they probably know better, right? They're the ones actually doing it. But I think that once I started doing it, it's like, oh, I can make these decisions. I can be a leader. I can inspire player development and impart my wisdom to these players and, push for them to be the best versions of themselves. So I think that from 2020 to now, like the biggest thing that I've gained is just the confidence in my abilities. And coaches also wear lots of different hats based on the team that they're on. So I think I came into coaching thinking I was going to be this coach that sits in the coach spot and kind of IGLs the team and runs the playbook and is like really heavy-handed in strategy. And what ended up happening was the opposite. I think that I'm much more of a leader, like almost like a football coach. Like I lead the team, I manage the atmosphere, I manage the personalities, and obviously I still have a heavy-handed strategy, especially when it comes to like team compositions and like macro level. But a lot of that is Rory, and now I have Kaplan doing that. So a lot of what I'm doing is the emotional, the leadership, the personnel management, atmosphere management, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And in saying that, do you feel like you're well prepared for this next endeavor with Sentinels moving forward? I suppose also just given that in some ways I think the experience will probably be very polar to what was the case with XSET for a while, where there wasn't a lot of attention on XSET, and now you're going to the attention, like just I mean, if there's on the heat map of attention, Sentinels are just bright red, right? I mean, yeah. Do you feel prepared for that?
Yeah, I think I do. And that's what I'm referring to. Like, I think that level of confidence that I have now allows me to walk into this new project in Sentinels and say, I am going to make the right decisions. I am going to lead this team to where it needs to be and do the things that I need to do to allow them to compete at the best level they can individually and as a team, and really get something greater than the sum of the parts. And not only am I confident and prepared and experienced now, I also have a cast of staff that will support me in this. I have a team manager / GM. I don't have to like be pulled into meetings with Riot in the middle of scrims anymore. I have an analyst coming in. I have an assistant coach, strategic coach who's going to be heavy-handed on the strategy side of things. So, I'm not doing it all myself like I was, end of 2021 XSET, where I'm the only guy and there's 5 players. I'm doing everything. Like I really have a solid plan. I have a solid group of people I can delegate tasks and responsibilities to, and I have a solid group of players that I was allowed to assemble myself. And I think that with all of those things combined, I'm extremely confident about what Sentinels Valorant is going to look like in 2023. And I think that even though there's going to be a huge spotlight on us and on me for making these decisions and putting this team together, I think I'm confident that these people will be happy in what they're going to receive.
What does success then look like to you with this new team going forward?
I guess it just depends where you put the bar, right? So I individually put the bar where we were at XSET, right? Like I'd ideally like to get to a similar place very quickly and then try and push forward and upwards. But it's not going to be immediate. It may take us some time to get even to where we were with XSET in Champions of this year. Maybe we'll face some hurdles. Maybe this isn't the final iteration of the roster that we'll eventually have, but I'm confident that the foundation starting off point that we're beginning with here is going to put us pretty close. And I think that relatively quickly we can get to where I expect us to be. But I am someone who's always valued consistency more than peak, and I reflect that in my scouting, um, the way that I build a team, the way that I structure practices and focus on like weekly goals and things that we're working on. So ideally, I would love for Sentinels to reach a level of consistency fairly quickly that XSET was reaching, even if it's not at the very top level. And then from there, we can continue to strike upwards.
Yeah. What kind of day to day do you like to have for your players?
Like
In,
at the team level or individual level?
both, I suppose. Yeah. Like, what do you ask of them on a day to day basis?
We practice. Usually, I try and keep it 5 days a week. Sometimes 6, especially if there's a match that week. We want to work a little harder, but generally, I make sure that people wake up about an hour and a half before we sit down at our desk and get ready to compete, because your mind needs to be, awake, active, fed, fueled, ready to go. You can't just be rolling out of bed in your PJs and expecting to give your 100% to your teammates. So, that's step one for every day is, sometimes in the past, I've even had to set wake up time on the schedule. Like, make sure you're awake by this time just so that everybody is aware, especially during boot camps and stuff. And then from there, it's, we do about a 30-minute warm-up period, jump into some server time, some VOD review, whatever we're working on that day. Whatever our focus points for the week and the day are, whatever maps we're scrimming that day, we'll prepare for. We need to make some strategy adjustments, some default adjustments, whatever it may be. And then from there, we go into scrims. So anywhere from 4 to 5 scrims a day. If we do 5, I try and take an hour break, like 2, then 3. And then at the end of each day, we do a review session. So, we sit down, and any round that we noted down as being of concern or something maybe went wrong, or we need to adjust some of the strategy, adjust some of the pathing, adjust what utility we're using on a retake, then we'll have those conversations. And I prefer to do them at the end of the day instead of just like on the fly, like in the server, because it allows us more time to actually have a back and forth. So I can say, hey, Wyatt, like I threw my nade and swung and died, and you didn't even try and swing and trade me. Like, what the fuck were you doing? Right. And then it allows you to be like, well, Don, actually, if you would notice here in this replay, I was actually looking over here getting shot at. I calmed that I couldn't swing with you and you swung anyways. What the fuck were you doing? Right. And even if the discourse is, you start off not on the same page, like the idea is to walk away from the conversation feeling content. Right.
Right.
And it touches back on what I was saying earlier. Like at the end of every practice day, we have to walk away with no like resentment, no hard feelings. Everything needs to be taken care of. So if that review session at the end of the day takes 30 minutes, it takes 30 minutes. If it takes 2 hours, it takes 2 hours. We're going to work through all our problems and make sure we walk away from practice feeling content with practice and holding no resentment towards our teammates or coaches.
Yeah. One time when I was talking to MC, coach of Cloud9 now, I remember he said something to me that was like, paraphrasing, but he said something along the lines of, every day I ask my players to give me at least 80%.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's reasonable to expect people to give 100% all the time because of a number of different factors, whether that be personal, something happened, etc. I just wanted to get your thoughts on that idea.
No, it's definitely accurate, and you can't get 100% out of people every single day. It's just impossible. It's not human nature. Like you'll never get that in sports, whether it's traditional sports or esports. You'll never get in the corporate world. Like, good employees, good teammates, they'll give you their most that they can every day, but it's never going to match what they give on a match day if they're a hyper competitive player. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of it is just getting the most that you can out of them. Like asking for 80% is, it's a good number to ask for, right? And in that, there's even a bit more nuance, right? Because in order to get 80% out of some of your younger players, sometimes the veteran and leadership and coaches, they're going to have to give 150, right? Just to offset and try and inspire these younger guys to give more effort. And I've had conversations with veteran players about that before, like, oh, I don't understand why I'm coming in and I'm working so hard when so-and-so is coming in and just kind of half-assing it. And it's like, well, you're a leader on this team. You're a veteran player. You're an older player. It's your job to come in and inspire these guys and set the tone and show them what working hard looks like. And that's what I expect of these players every day, especially the leaders on the team to really drive for that. And hopefully, like touching back on what we talked about with TenZ, like I don't think that he's used to having people push him in that way. So if we have people like dephh, like myself, coming in and giving 100, 120, 130% every day, then he will give us that 80%.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. I mean, that's everything I got. I appreciate you joining me for the first episode of this unnamed show.
Of course, man. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it, man. Good to talk to you.
You as well, man.
All right. We're all good.